Now, if you have an altitude, altitudes of two triangles are similar. The lengths of the corresponding altitudes are proportional to the lengths of the corresponding sides. So similar to our angle bisector, the corresponding pieces are going to match up to each other, and we set up a proportion and solve for x. So when we do that, we first need to identify our altitudes. Altitudes are lines that connect opposite vertices to the base or opposite side of a triangle at a right angle. So these are your altitudes. Just going to use ALT to write for altitudes. So we're going to do altitude over altitude. And then it's going to get matched up with side over side. So whether you're doing AC or AB, but it will match up with a corresponding side. So side over side. So keep that in mind. So let's look at an example of that. Let's look at some examples for altitudes. We've got example 7 here. And so I have an altitude. This one is outside of my triangle. That does in fact happen. Your altitude can happen outside of the triangle, but just remember it happens at a right angle. And we are going to use a side. That went a little crooked. So we have altitude and side, and I'm going to pick altitude and side. So we said altitude over altitude. And then side over side. So let's take what we have and plug it in. So you have an altitude of x and an altitude of 7, and then a side of 10 and a side of 8. And then we cross multiply. We get 8x equals 70. Divide by 8. And x is 8.75, which is the same as 8 3/4. Or if you want to leave this as fraction, you can say 35 over 4. That works for all of those. Okay, let's look at one more example of altitudes and sides. So we have an altitude here of 30. This one's inside of our triangle with a side of 32. And then an altitude of x and a side of 24. So if I set this up in altitude over altitude, we get 30 over x, and then side over side, 32 over 24, and cross multiply. And if you want, you can actually reduce here first. 32 over 24 reduces to 4/3. So I can actually say this is 4 over 3 before I cross multiply. So it turns into 30 times 3 and 4 times x. So 30 times 3 is 90 times 4x. And when you divide by 4, x becomes, you could say 22.5 or 45 over 2. Works as well.